The global cost of cybercrime is hundreds of billions of dollars to both businesses and the global economy every single year. However, the true cost of hacking and cyber attacks isn't just the money being lost. It can lead to other disruptions and losses too, all of which are bad for businesses. I'm Danny Palmer. This is ZDNet Security Update, and with me to discuss the true cost of cybercrime is Adam Philpott, Senior Vice President at McAfee. Thanks for joining me, Adam. So first of all, what is the annual cost of cybercrime right now?
It's actually huge. Great to be here, by the way, Danny. We run these reports regularly because it's interesting to keep an eye on how the economic impact is changing over time. We've seen a significant increase. $1 trillion is what we estimate the impact to be. That's about 1% of global GDP, and that's significantly up since 2018. Just to give you some context, back in 2018, it was about $600 million, now up to, as I said, $1 trillion. So pretty big.
And there's obviously the initial financial impact of all of this. And we've seen with the cost of ransomware, the cost of ransomware attacks is going up. Various bits of data are being sold on underground forums. Businesses losing money in email compromise scams. But there's more to just the initial attack. When organizations are hit by hackers, it's not just one and done. It can have a long-term effect on finances as well.
No, that's quite right. And I mean, that's why we refer to it as the hidden cost of cybercrime, because some things have a financial value. You can put financial value on outages, on lost information, on lost productivity. Other things are less easy to put a financial value on. And so if we think about what some of those dimensions are, you can think about personally identifiable information, PII. That's painful, but that's not as painful as if you have a performance impact on your business. That's where the real dollars start to come in. There's other implications as well. So you think about when you have an outage, one of the costs isn't just those implications on your performance, but actually additional investments you may then make as a result. So for example, about $145 million of that impact is $1 billion rather, is related to the spend on cyber and on people to then come in and help mitigate. There are other things that are actually even more hidden though. So you might think of organizations that actually retreat from their online presence, which has an implication on their ability to execute in the market, particularly as we think about the digitization which is going on with many of our clients. So those are just some of a number of different implications that our clients are facing and the costs that they're then having to bear.
I suppose one of the big examples of how much cyber attacks can cost organizations is NotPetya when it hit organizations around the world a few years ago. Of course, you had companies like huge shipping companies having the initial hit of not being able to do business because their systems are all offline. Then you have companies with tens of thousands of employees having to essentially rebuild their entire IT infrastructure, which I imagine must cost a fortune.
Yeah, and it's not just the costs of rebuilding. That's actually dwarfed by the impacts on their top line revenues, of course, because they're unable to transact during those periods, which has a massive implication on their market valuation. So then you can see how there's a hit on revenue, there's a hit on brand valuation, and there's also a hit on long-term, customer relationships as well, and that longer-term revenue stream as well. So it's pretty significant, the cost of an outage. That's where it really starts to get into some of the big dollars.
And I won't name names in particular, but we've seen instances of where a company has been hit by a major cyber attack, and that has hit their reputation. People either not wanting to do business for that company anymore, or trying to get out of the contract or services they might have with them. So they think, okay, well, I don't trust these guys with my data.
Yes, that's exactly right. And we see them, in the last few weeks even, which I guess is what you're referring to there as well. Do you know what though? I also view how can the glass be half full, right? Because it's all doom and gloom, and cybercrime is a reality of doing business today. So cybercrime is part of the risk that we take in pursuit of the benefits that we seek when we digitize. And so the other way we can also look at it is, you take, for example, Apple Computer or some other large organizations are actually using data privacy and using cyber resilience and cyber security to their strategic advantage, to say, actually, do business with us because of these things. And so it's been talked about a lot, but it's nice to see it starting to manifest, is that people are seeing this as part of their strategic differentiation as an organization. Actually, even further than that, part of who they are, part of their brand persona, I would say as well.
Yes, you mentioned Apple there, and there are a few companies like that which do seem to be presenting themselves as, look at us, we can keep your information secure, which is good for them, good for consumers. But I suppose they can't be completely impenetrable either. I mean, they've still got to be careful when it comes to protect themselves, because as we've seen in the world of cybersecurity, a lot of bold claims can be made about being unhackable, and usually those companies which say they're unhackable tend to end up finding they have people getting very interested into getting into their networks.
Yeah, we often don't see that anymore, because it's probably the quickest way to become proven wrong. I think also the industry has matured to recognize it's a shifting target. And I mean, I talk a lot about risk. Risk seems less popular as a topic in the cyber domain somewhat these days. But for me, that's how it ties back to the business, because business is all about taking risks in the pursuit of growth. And if you don't take any risks, you don't get any growth. And so it's become an accepted reality of the world. Of course, we try to negate and mitigate to the best possible degree what that risk is, but we are still taking risk. The other thing I would say is it ties to complexity. We've talked already on this conversation around the nature of the threats. You touched on ransomware, you gave some examples. So the threat landscape is part of the risk, but another component of the risk is the complexity that organizations are seeking to secure. And that complexity is sometimes in their underlying infrastructure. So for example, as we've seen throughout this year, the attack surface, as we call it, has got significantly bigger as people have been connecting from home on different devices, non-corporate devices, etc. But the other dimension of complexity is the way in which they secure that infrastructure itself. That's also extremely complex. A product here, a product there. Quick, these people are working from home, let's get another product. And that may solve it may give an immediate fix to a need, but it actually creates longer term challenges in terms of the overall complexity as you think about taking a more integrated architectural approach to this rather than a piecemeal approach and giving rise to unnecessary complexity. So those are all elements, I think, of risk as well.
You touched upon something that a lot of us have been dealing with this year, the sudden change to working from home. How has this impacted cybersecurity, and indeed how cyber criminals have been attempting to operate?
Yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating, I have to say, doing this discussion on video. We may have done it in person in the past. And, I was on a group discussion with our engineering team yesterday, because we were talking about what we've seen during the pandemic in terms of the way people connect existed before the pandemic and was moving in that direction, but the pandemic has fundamentally accelerated it. What we also see, though, is that it won't return to normal. For example, what we've seen from some organizations is that 40 to 50% of their people are now working remotely, but even then they'll only go back to kind of 25%. In the past, they were at 10%. So we're seeing a tripling of the amount of people working in this way, and I think we'll see it ongoing as well. The other thing I would say is that business leaders like myself and my peers are cutting OPEX budgets for things like travel, not eradicating them, but reducing them. They're cutting OPEX budgets for things like real estate and being smarter about how do we use real estate rather than be imprisoned by it, so to speak. And therefore, we're relying on technology to give us more flexibility in how we operate. Now, to your point, that then gives rise to cyber threat, right? It expands the attack surface. It makes it much bigger an area to cover. I would also say not only are we seeing people working from home, so we're seeing a diaspora of people, and the devices by which they connect, we're also seeing the things to which they connect changing. We're seeing a massive explosion in the number of cloud applications, in IaaS infrastructure, in both sanctioned and unsanctioned applications, i.e. cloud applications that the company buys themselves, cloud applications which departments, divisions, or people within an organization buys unknowingly to that company. And that's also a threat vector, because now we can start to share information. We can start to leave it on public buckets that may not be secured, may not be encrypted. We may start to share information thinking we're doing so in one team's community, but that community actually includes external people unbeknownst to us. And so there's all these different types of risks that open up that we need to think about securing. And again, we need to think about securing it without adding your untold complexity. So how do we flex our infrastructure to cover that, as opposed to bolt things on with gaps in the middle?
Bearing all that in mind, what can organizations do to ensure that they're not part of the next $1 trillion of cyber criminal damage, and how can they secure themselves against ongoing cyber attacks?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, one of the things I talked about earlier was spending, so part of it, a small part of it, but a part of that $1 trillion, 145 billion, is in cyber spend. So my view on that is spend smartly. I get sometimes there's a compelling need to react quickly, and sometimes if we're in an emergency situation, we can't make a good long-term decision, so be it. It's an emergency. But where we can, let's make smart decisions, thinking about how does all of this investment tie together in an architectural vision? How does it tie together with what I already have? How does it tie together with how I see the shape of my infrastructure and my business changing over time, so that I have flexibility built in to morph as that changes without breaking my architecture? And what that does mean is not having just discrete silos of bolt-on, but having things that I can manage in a uniform way, thinking of it as a platform, thinking about common policy, thinking about how do I operationalize this? How can I share threat intelligence across that platform, not just for visibility, but also for control as well, regardless of whether it's on-prem, on someone's device, on a mobile device, in the cloud, bringing all of that in. And there are no perfect solutions, but thinking that through as an integrated approach, I think that makes a ton of sense. So that covers a little bit on the spend. The other thing I would say is obviously education. We talk about it a lot, but it never changes. We need to continue to educate people, particularly when they're a diaspora working from home and we don't have the posters in the office or in-person all hands, thinking differently about how we reach our constituent employees to help them understand the risks that they may be exposed to. If somebody's offering them a vaccine for a good price, if someone's sending them an email saying they've got a delivery, do they want to know its tracking status? And they don't know what that delivery is, nor do they recognize the URL. Just different types of training and gamification even to engage employees as a part of that cyber front line of defense.
Hopefully, for those watching this video, it will also serve as education and help as well. It's been some really good advice, Adam. Thanks for joining me on ZDNet Security Update. And for more information and advice on how you can protect yourself from cyber attacks, be sure to keep watching ZDNet YouTube channel and keep reading articles and features on ZDNet. Thanks for watching.